Log line. Indy lives with her aunt and uncle, believing her life is fine, until an accident introduces Bryant Bailey into her world. He's not her type, stubborn, persistent, and caring, but through him, Indy begins to discover who she truly is and what she's worth. Indy had always considered her life predictable. Living under her aunt and uncle's roof meant following their rules, helping with chores, and staying out of the way. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, or so she thought. The accident changed everything. When Bryant Bailey entered her world, it was like a ripple disrupting the calm surface of her life. From the moment he insisted on driving her home after the accident, Indy found him infuriating. He was persistent, always showing up when she least expected it, offering rides, asking questions, and somehow managing to see past the walls she'd built around herself. Bryant wasn't like anyone she had ever met. He was confident without being arrogant, kind without expecting anything in return. His stubbornness grated on her nerves, but it was his unwavering belief in her worth that slowly began to chip away at the self-doubt she'd carried for years. At first, Indy resisted. She had spent so long accepting the life she had, a life where she blended into the background and didn't ask for more. But Bryant refused to let her hide. He challenged her to see herself differently, to believe she deserved happiness, respect, and love. Their conversations, sometimes heated and other times surprisingly vulnerable, opened up new possibilities Indy had never dared to imagine. He noticed things no one else did, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about books, the quiet strength in her voice when she stood up for herself. With every interaction, Indy began to question the life she'd accepted and the version of herself she'd been taught to believe in. Bryant's presence was both comforting and unsettling. He made her feel seen, truly seen, and that was the scariest part of all. Because once someone sees you, it's harder to keep pretending you're invisible. Act 1. Indy's routine life. Indy lives under the strict, cold care of her aunt and uncle after losing her parents at a young age. She follows the rules, blends into the background, and avoids drawing attention. At school, Indy keeps her head down, careful not to speak out of turn or engage in conversations unless absolutely necessary. Her clothes are plain, her hair always neatly tied back, reflecting the unspoken command to never stand out. Lunchtimes are spent at the farthest corner of the cafeteria, where she can observe without being seen. Teachers often overlook her, mistaking her quiet nature for shyness. When she walks through the hallways, she moves like a shadow, always taking the longer route to avoid crowded spaces. Even at home, she makes herself small, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of her aunt and uncle's cold, orderly world. Indy has perfected the art of invisibility, believing that staying unnoticed is the safest way to survive. Her life is predictable: school, chores, and solitude, until one fateful day. It starts like any other morning, with the same monotonous routine. Indy ties her shoes, grabs her worn-out backpack, and steps out into the chilly air. But as she walks to school, a stray cat with amber eyes crosses her path, pausing to look at her with an almost knowing gaze. Something about the encounter stirs a strange feeling in Indy, a flicker of curiosity she hasn't felt in years. Later that day, a substitute teacher calls on her unexpectedly in class, breaking the rhythm of her carefully constructed invisibility. Her voice trembles as she answers, but the teacher's gentle smile gives her a rare sense of validation. As the sun sets, casting golden light through the narrow windows of her small room, Indy can't shake the feeling that the universe has nudged her ever so slightly, like something is about to change. Act 2. The accident. Bryant Bailey accidentally hits Indy's cat while driving through the neighborhood. The loud thud makes his heart race, and he immediately pulls over, scrambling out of the car. Indy, who had been gardening in the front yard, hears the commotion and rushes to the scene. Her eyes widen in panic as she sees her beloved cat, Snowball, lying motionless on the pavement. Bryant's face pales as he stammers an apology, his voice thick with regret. He kneels down, carefully lifting the injured cat into his arms. Indy's heart aches at the sight, tears welling up in her eyes. Despite her shock, she notices the genuine concern in Bryant's expression. "We need to get him to the vet," Bryant says, his voice steady but urgent. Indy hesitates for a moment before nodding, her hands trembling as she unlocks her car. Bryant gently places Snowball in a blanket Indy provides, and they drive to the nearest animal clinic in silence. The tension between them is palpable, Indy's worry for Snowball mixed with her frustration at Bryant's carelessness. But beneath it all, there's a flicker of gratitude for his willingness to take responsibility. At the clinic, they wait anxiously as the vet examines Snowball. Bryant sits beside Indy, stealing glances at her as she nervously wrings her hands. Finally, the vet returns with good news: Snowball will recover with some rest and medication. Indy's relief is palpable, and for the first time that day, she meets Bryant's gaze. He offers a small, apologetic smile. "I'm really sorry," he says softly. "I didn't see him." Indy's anger softens, replaced by an unexpected sense of understanding. "Thank you for helping." It's a small moment, but one that sparks the beginning of something neither of them could have anticipated. He insists on taking the cat to the vet, much to Indy's annoyance. "She's fine," Indy argues, her arms crossed tightly. "She's just being dramatic." But Luke is unconvinced, eyeing the cat curled up on the couch with suspicion. "Indy, she hasn't been eating, and she's been hiding under the bed all morning. That's not normal." Indy rolls her eyes, but she can tell there's no changing Luke's mind. His protective nature kicks in, and once he's set on something, there's no moving him. "She's not a baby, Luke," she mutters, but Luke's already grabbing the cat carrier from the closet. "She's your baby, Indy," he says, his tone softening as he looks at the cat with concern. "And we both know how much you love her. Let's just get her checked out, okay? For peace of mind." Indy huffs but finally relents, too tired to argue anymore. "Fine. But I swear, if they tell me she's perfectly fine and I spent all that money for nothing, then we'll just get her a treat on the way home," Luke interrupts, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Indy lets out an exasperated sigh but can't help the small smile that creeps onto her face at his unrelenting optimism. "You're impossible." But she follows him to the door, the cat carrier now in his hands, and the morning's tension melts away as they head out to the vet. Their first interaction is tense. Indy sees Bryant as careless and irritating, while Bryant sees her as guarded and distant. Act 3, unlikely encounters. Bryant keeps showing up, at school, offering rides, and trying to check on her cat. It starts innocently enough, with him waving her down one afternoon as she exits the school building. "Hey, Indy, you need a ride home?" His smile is wide and warm, but something about it feels a little too eager. Indy hesitates. No, I'm good. Thanks." But Bryant is persistent. "Come on, I was just in the neighborhood. And you know I don't mind driving you home." Indy suppresses a sigh. She can't deny the kindness in his offer, but she's not sure why he's suddenly so concerned with her. "I'm fine." "Really?" A few days later, Bryant shows up again, this time on the steps of her favorite coffee shop, where she's meeting a friend. "I thought you might be here," he says, leaning casually against the wall. "I wanted to check on your cat. How's she doing?" Indy freezes, a lump forming in her throat. She's fine," she says, not sure whether to be flattered or irritated by his sudden involvement in her life. "She's just being moody, you know." Cats. Bryant's brow furrows slightly, his gaze softening. "If you need anything, just let me know. I'm happy to help." Indy's heart skips a beat, but she forces herself to shake her head. "Thanks, but I'm fine." The next morning, as she walks into school, she spots him waiting by her locker. "You're up early," she mutters, a little caught off guard. He's holding a small bag of treats, the kind she usually buys for her cat. "I thought I'd drop these off for your cat. Just in case she's feeling better," he says, eyes sparkling with a mixture of concern and something else that Indy can't quite place. Indy takes the bag hesitantly, but the gesture makes her feel a bit uncomfortable. "I can handle it, Bryant," she says, her voice firmer than before. "Really?" But Bryant only grins, unfazed by her resistance. "Just looking out for you, Indy. You're not alone, all right?" She watches him leave, still unsure of what to make of his constant appearances. It's sweet, in a way, but it's starting to feel like he's overstepping, and she can't help but wonder why he's so determined to be involved in her life. Indy resists his persistent kindness, brushing him off at every turn. Bryant's lighthearted teasing starts to chip away at Indy's defenses. Act 4. Cracks in the wall. Indy begins noticing Bryant's small acts of kindness, helping others, standing up to bullies, and always keeping his word. It's subtle at first, just fleeting moments that catch her attention when she least expects them. One afternoon after school, she watches him step in when a group of students starts teasing a quiet kid in the hallway. Bryant doesn't raise his voice, doesn't make a scene. He just walks over and stands in front of the kid, a calm presence among the bullies. "Hey, knock it off," he says simply, his tone firm but without aggression. The group hesitates, clearly caught off guard by his unwavering confidence. After a few seconds, they disperse, and Bryant gives the kid a reassuring smile before walking away, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Indy, who had been walking by, can't help but watch the exchange, her heart unexpectedly warmed. She knows Bryant isn't the loudest or most obvious person, but there's something magnetic about the way he quietly takes action when others might turn a blind eye. The next day, she notices him holding the door open for a frazzled teacher juggling papers and books. Without hesitation, Bryant offers to carry some of her things to the staff room, the teacher thanking him with a grateful smile. It's not a grand gesture, but it's thoughtful, and it's the kind of thing that makes Indy take notice. Later that week, during a class project, Bryant is assigned to work with a student who's notorious for being difficult and uncooperative. Despite the tension, Bryant doesn't get frustrated. He patiently explains the assignment, offering to stay after class to help. By the end of the period, they've finished the project together, and the other student, who had barely spoken at the start, gives Bryant a grateful nod. Indy can't help but feel a flicker of admiration. She's used to seeing people rush through life, focused on their own problems, but Bryant seems different. He's the kind of person who makes time for others, who doesn't hesitate to step up when someone needs help. He keeps his word, even when it's inconvenient or goes unnoticed by most people. One afternoon, after class, she overhears Bryant in the hallway, giving his word to a group of friends. "I'll be there, I promise." I won't leave you hanging. It's a simple promise, but there's no doubt in her mind that he means it. Something about the sincerity in his voice catches her off guard, and for the first time, Indy starts to wonder if there's more to Bryant than she originally thought. They start having brief conversations, and she finds herself drawn to his honesty. Her aunt and uncle disapprove of Bryant, warning Indy to stay away from him. Act 5. Growing friendship. Bryant convinces Indy to help volunteer at the animal shelter. It starts with a casual conversation after school one day, when Indy's walking to her car and Bryant catches up to her, his usual bright energy impossible to ignore. "Hey, Indy," he says, grinning as he falls into step beside her. "You know, I've been thinking. The animal shelter's always looking for volunteers, and I could really use some extra hands this weekend. You in?" Indy hesitates, her first instinct to decline. "I don't know, Bryant. I've got a lot going on with school and everything." Bryant gives her a knowing smile, his eyes twinkling with a mix of encouragement and charm. "Come on, you'd be amazing at it. Plus, I'm sure you could use a little break from all the stress. Just think of it as a way to help some animals. And hey, you might even have fun." Indy can't help but raise an eyebrow. "You really think I'd have fun cleaning cages and walking dogs?" Bryant shrugs, unfazed by her skepticism. "I'm not saying it's all glamorous, but I promise you it's rewarding. And who knows? You might find it more relaxing than you think. Plus, I'll be there, so it'll be a good time." There's something about his enthusiasm, the way he genuinely believes she'll enjoy it, that makes her reconsider. "All right," she says, the words slipping out before she can overthink it. "Fine, I'll give it a try." Bryant's face lights up. "Awesome. Trust me, you won't regret it." The weekend rolls around, and when Indy arrives at the shelter, she's surprised by how much it feels like a second home. The staff is welcoming, the animals excited to see anyone who'll give them attention, and there's an undeniable energy that she hadn't expected. Bryant is already there, kneeling in front of a dog's cage, scratching behind its ears. "There you are," he calls when he spots her, his grin as wide as ever. "This is Buster," he says, motioning to the eager dog wagging his tail. "He's been waiting for you." Indy laughs despite herself, her earlier hesitation starting to melt away as she joins Bryant and the dogs. He leads her through the different tasks, feeding, cleaning, and most importantly, playing with the animals, who seem to be as happy as she is. She finds herself genuinely enjoying the experience, laughing as a puppy tries to climb onto her lap and wag its tail furiously. As the afternoon wears on, Indy realizes she's having fun. It's a different kind of joy, simple and grounding, and something about the way Bryant seems so comfortable in this world makes it even easier to settle in. By the end of the day, she's surprised to find herself agreeing to come back next weekend. "You were right," she admits, as they sit together on the bench, watching the animals. "This was actually nice." Bryant smiles softly, his gaze lingering on the dogs playing in the yard. "Told you," he says, the warmth in his voice making Indy feel something deeper. Sometimes, all you need is a little change of pace. They bond over caring for animals, sharing vulnerable moments between shifts. Indy begins to see a softer, more compassionate side of Bryant. Act 6. Discovering self-worth. Bryant encourages Indy to stand up for herself and dream beyond her confined life. It happens one evening when they're hanging out after volunteering at the shelter. The sky has just started to darken, and they're sitting on the edge of the park, the distant hum of the city a soft background to their conversation. Indy leans back on the bench, arms crossed loosely, as she talks about her frustrations. I don't know, Bryant. I just feel like I'm stuck. School's a never-ending grind, and everything I do feels like it's only leading to the next thing. I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to actually live the life I want. Bryant listens intently, his expression a mix of concern and understanding. After a beat, he speaks, his voice quiet but firm. You're more than capable of more than this, Indy. You don't have to keep following the same path just because it's what everyone expects. You deserve to chase your own dreams, whatever they are. Indy shifts uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. She's so used to being practical, to focusing on what's expected of her, that the idea of daring to dream feels almost foreign. But what if it's too late, she murmurs, the weight of the question hanging between them. What if I'm not good enough to do something different? What if I mess it all up? Bryant tilts his head, considering her words carefully. Indy, everyone messes up. Everyone has moments where they feel lost. But that doesn't mean you have to settle for what's easy or safe. Life's too short to stay in a box that's been built for you. You've got so much more potential than you think. He looks at her earnestly, his eyes soft yet determined. You're strong, smart, and more capable than you give yourself credit for. You just need to believe that you can do more than just get by. You deserve a life where you're happy, not just one where you survive. Indy feels a flicker of something deep inside her, an unfamiliar stirring. She's heard this kind of advice before, but from Bryant, it hits differently. He doesn't just say it because he's trying to make her feel better. He says it because he believes in her, truly believes that she can rise above the limits she's set for herself. I don't know what I want, though, Indy admits, her voice quiet but earnest. I don't even know where to start. Bryant smiles softly, nudging her shoulder with his. That's the part that's exciting. It doesn't matter if you don't know the exact path yet. What matters is that you start exploring, take that first step, and trust that you'll figure it out along the way. Indy looks at him, her heart swelling with something she can't quite name, hope, maybe, or something like it. For the first time in a long while, she starts to think that maybe, just maybe, she could dare to dream. Maybe you're right, she says, the words tentative but hopeful. I know I am, Bryant replies, his voice full of warmth. You've got this, Indy. Don't let anyone, or anything, hold you back. He asks her what she wants for her future, something no one has ever asked her before. Indy starts imagining a life where she can make her own choices. Act 7. Hidden pain. Bryant opens up about his difficult past, absent parents, struggles with self-doubt, and finding purpose through helping others. It happens one evening as they're walking back from the shelter, the sky a deep shade of indigo above them, stars twinkling faintly in the crisp night air. There's a quiet between them, the kind that feels comfortable but also heavy with unspoken things. Indy glances over at Bryant, noticing the way his shoulders are slightly slumped, a far cry from his usual upbeat self. She hesitates, unsure whether to break the silence, but then, out of nowhere, Bryant speaks, his voice low and almost hesitant. You know, he begins, his words carefully chosen, I've never really talked about my parents much before. Not to anyone. But I think it's time. Indy stops in her tracks, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. You don't have to if you don't want to, she says gently, sensing the vulnerability in his words. Bryant shakes his head, his expression thoughtful. No, I want to. You deserve to know. The thing is, My parents were never really there. Not in the way that mattered. He exhales slowly, as though the words are difficult to push out. They were always busy with their own lives, work, their friends, their stuff, and I was just sort of left to figure things out on my own. No guidance, no real emotional support. Just silence. Indy watches him closely, feeling an ache in her chest for him, but she doesn't interrupt. She can see how hard this is for him to share, but she also knows that it's important. It wasn't easy, he continues, his voice growing quieter. I used to think there was something wrong with me, you know? Like, maybe I wasn't worth paying attention to. There were days when I felt invisible, like I didn't matter to anyone, not even my own parents. He chuckles softly, but it's bitter. I used to get caught up in that feeling of being alone. It made me doubt myself, made me question my worth. Indy's heart aches as she listens, and she wants to reach out, to say something that will make him feel better, but she knows that this is his truth, and sometimes, all you can do is listen. It took me a long time to figure out how to cope, he adds, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I used to keep to myself a lot, just drifting through life. But eventually, I realized that the only way I could feel like I mattered was if I made a difference for someone else. That's when I started volunteering, helping out at places like the shelter, doing what I could for people and animals who needed it. It was like I found my purpose through helping others. Indy nods slowly, her heart swelling with admiration. I think that's incredible, Bryant, she says softly. It's not easy to turn pain into something positive. Bryant shrugs, his gaze distant but thoughtful. It wasn't. It took time. But I think that's why I'm so passionate about helping now. Because I know what it feels like to feel alone, and I never want anyone to feel like that if I can do something about it. Indy is quiet for a long moment, processing his words. She's always known him as the confident, caring guy who seems to have it all together, but hearing about his struggles makes her realize just how much depth there is to him. She feels a sense of respect and understanding for him that she hadn't fully grasped before. Thank you for sharing that, Indy says quietly, her voice soft. I had no idea, but I think it explains a lot. You're a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for. Bryant looks at her, his smile returning, though it's softer, more genuine. I don't know about that, he says with a shrug, but I like to think I've learned something along the way. Indy smiles back, feeling a bond growing between them, something deeper than just friendship. It's a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement that they both have scars, but they're both finding ways to heal. His vulnerability inspires Indy to share pieces of her own pain. Their connection deepens as they realize how much they understand each other. Act 8, Aunt and Uncle's control. Indy's aunt tightens her grip, forbidding her from spending time with Bryant. It happens one evening after dinner when Indy's been out with Bryant again, volunteering at the shelter and walking through the park afterward, the kind of simple moments that make her feel like she's finally living her own life. She's just returned home, still riding the high from a good conversation with Bryant, when her aunt, who's been noticeably quiet all evening, suddenly speaks up. "Where were you?" her aunt asks, her voice sharp, eyes narrowing as she looks up from her newspaper. It's a routine question, one that Indy has heard countless times, but tonight there's a weight to it, an undercurrent of something more. "I was at the shelter," Indy replies, shrugging off her jacket. "Just like I said I would be." Her aunt's eyes flicker with a mix of suspicion and frustration. "I know where you were. What I want to know is why you're always with that boy. What's his name?" "Bryant?" Indy falters for a moment, taken off guard by the sudden tension. "He's just a friend, Aunt Clara. We're volunteering together, that's all." But her aunt's expression hardens, and she leans forward in her chair, her voice dropping low and commanding. "I've told you before, Indy. I don't like you spending time with him. He's trouble, and I won't have you getting involved with someone like that." Indy's heart skips a beat, the familiar sting of her aunt's overprotectiveness biting deep. "What do you mean, trouble?" she protests, confusion rising in her chest. "Bryant's not like that. He's kind, and kind?" Her aunt cuts her off, her grip tightening around the edge of her chair as if the very mention of Bryant has sent her into a simmering rage. "You don't know anything about him, Indy. You think you can trust him, but I've seen the way he acts. He's not someone you should be associating with. People like him don't have good intentions, and I won't let you waste your time on someone who will only lead you astray." Indy's breath catches in her throat, her mind racing. She feels a flicker of anger, frustration boiling up inside her. "Why are you always so hard on him? You don't even know him. You don't know anything about his life or what he's been through. He's one of the few people who actually cares about me, who's helped me when I needed it most." Her aunt's face hardens, a tight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I don't care what he's done for you. I won't have you mixing with someone who has no future, someone who can't offer you anything but disappointment." Her voice sharpens. "And I forbid you from seeing him again. Do you understand?" Indy stands frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The words hit her like a slap, sharp and unrelenting. For a moment, everything feels like it's spinning out of control, the weight of her aunt's command pressing down on her. "I don't need your permission, Aunt Clara," Indy finally says, her voice barely above a whisper, though it carries an edge of defiance she hasn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "I'm not a little kid anymore. I can make my own decisions." Her aunt's eyes flash with anger, but she doesn't back down. "You may not be a little kid, but as long as you're under my roof, you follow my rules." Her tone is final, leaving no room for negotiation. "And those rules include staying away from Bryant." Indy's stomach twists with a mix of frustration and helplessness. She wants to argue, to stand her ground, but the weight of her aunt's authority looms large. She doesn't want to cause more conflict, but at the same time, she feels a fierce protectiveness for the bond she's formed with Bryant. He's the one who's made her feel seen and valued, the one who's pushed her to step outside her comfort zone. I can't just stop seeing him," Indy says quietly, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. "You don't get to control who I spend time with. I won't let you do that." For a moment, it feels like her aunt is going to explode with rage, but instead, she just gives a short, biting laugh. "You think you have a choice in this? Fine. Do what you want, but don't come crying to me when you realize you've made a mistake." Indy takes a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She can't let her aunt control her every move, but the confrontation leaves her feeling defeated, like she's standing on the edge of something she can't quite understand. The air between them is thick with tension, and Indy knows that this isn't over. But she also knows she has to make a choice. The household rules become stricter, making Indy feel trapped. Bryant encourages Indy to fight for what she wants, even if it means breaking the rules. Act 9, the first kiss after an emotional night at the shelter. Bryant walks Indy home. The shelter had been a whirlwind of emotions, the animals needing more care than usual, and a particularly heartbreaking case involving a stray kitten that tugged at Indy's heartstrings. She could still feel the heaviness in her chest, the weight of helplessness as she watched the small animal curl up in a corner, too weak to even lift its head. The shelter workers were doing everything they could, but there were so many animals, and not enough resources. Bryant had been by her side the entire time, offering support when the tears started to fall. "It's hard," he'd said softly, his voice steady as always. "But we're doing the best we can. That's what matters." Now, as they walk through the quiet streets of the neighborhood, the only sound is the crunch of their footsteps on the pavement. Indy doesn't say much, too lost in her thoughts, but she's grateful for his presence. There's something comforting about having him there, even without words. "You okay?" Bryant asks after a while, glancing over at her. His tone is gentle, but there's a note of concern in his voice that makes her stomach tighten. Indy exhales slowly, shaking her head. "I don't know. I feel like I should be doing more. I know I can't save every animal, but it's just hard to see them like that, you know?" Her voice cracks a little, betraying the tears she'd been trying to hold back all night. Bryant slows his pace, walking alongside her as they make their way down the familiar road. "You are doing more than you realize," he says quietly. "Sometimes just being there for them, showing them kindness, it makes all the difference. They feel seen because of you. And that's huge." Indy looks at him, her throat tight. "I wish I could do more. I feel so powerless sometimes." Bryant glances at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know what that feels like. There were times when I thought I couldn't make a difference either, when everything felt too big, too overwhelming. But then I realized, small things add up. You're making a bigger impact than you think. One animal at a time, one person at a time, you're helping more than you'll ever know." Indy stops for a moment, letting his words sink in. There's something about the way Bryant talks, the way he carries himself, that makes her believe in the possibility of change, even in the face of overwhelming odds. He's right. Maybe it's not about saving the world in one go. Maybe it's about taking small steps, doing what she can, and making those moments count. "Thanks, Bryant," she says softly, her voice steadying. "I really needed to hear that." Bryant gives her a small smile, his expression warm. "Anytime. I'm here for you, Indy." They continue walking, the cool night air brushing against their skin, and for the first time in a while, Indy feels a sense of peace. Even after the emotional roller coaster of the night, she's grateful for the connection they share. Bryant's quiet support means more to her than she can put into words. As they approach her house, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement, Indy turns to him. "You don't have to walk me all the way to the door, you know. I'm fine from here." Bryant stops, looking at her with a soft but reassuring smile. "I don't mind. Besides, I'm not in a rush." His tone is easy, but there's a sincerity in his eyes that makes her heart flutter unexpectedly. Indy smiles back, a small, thankful curve of her lips. "Well, I appreciate it. I really do." They stand there for a moment, the night stretching out in front of them. Neither of them wants the night to end, but eventually, Bryant gives her a small nod. "Take care of yourself, Indy. Get some rest. You've earned it." Indy nods, feeling a strange tug in her chest. She's never been one to rely on others, but somehow, with Bryant, it feels different. It feels right. "I will," she says quietly, watching as he turns to walk back down the street. "Good night, Bryant." "Good night, Indy," he replies, his voice soft but full of warmth. As she watches him walk away, Indy feels a wave of gratitude wash over her. Despite everything, the challenges, the struggles, the weight of the night, she knows that she's not alone. And that thought gives her a strange sense of comfort as she heads inside, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. A quiet moment between them leads to a tender first kiss. Indy's walls crumble, realizing she's falling for someone she never expected. Act 10. Breaking point. Indy's aunt finds out about the kiss and punishes her harshly, reminding Indy she'll never be worthy of love. Indy's heart pounds in her chest as she steps through the front door, the faint echo of her aunt's footsteps growing louder as she enters the living room. The air feels thick, charged with something that makes the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She's barely had time to process the kiss, the sweetness of it still lingering on her lips, before her aunt's voice cuts through the silence like a knife. Indy. The single word carries an edge, a warning that makes Indy freeze in her tracks. Her aunt is standing by the staircase, her arms crossed, her gaze cold and unforgiving. "Do you think I'm blind?" her aunt asks, her voice deceptively calm but filled with an underlying fury. "Do you think I wouldn't notice what's been going on between you and that boy?" Indy swallows hard, her stomach twisting with dread. She can feel the heat rising to her cheeks, and the weight of guilt presses down on her shoulders. She hasn't even had a chance to tell her aunt about Bryant, and now the truth has already come out. The kiss. The stolen moment of warmth and connection she's been trying to keep hidden. She hadn't meant for it to happen, but it did. I wasn't doing anything wrong," Indy stammers, trying to steady her breath, but the words feel small against the harshness of her aunt's stare. "You're not a little girl anymore, Indy," her aunt snaps, her voice rising in anger. "You think you can just go around kissing boys, making decisions about your life without considering the consequences? You're not some princess in a fairy tale. You're nothing but a disappointment." The words hit Indy like a slap, each one stinging and echoing in her mind long after her aunt has spoken. She opens her mouth to argue, to defend herself, but her aunt doesn't give her the chance. "You'll never be worthy of love," her aunt continues, her voice dripping with venom. "Not from him, not from anyone. You think that boy cares about you? You're just a fool, Indy. A fool who'll end up alone, because no one will ever want someone like you." Indy's chest tightens, the sting of her aunt's words cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. Her throat tightens with the urge to cry, but she swallows it down, her face growing hot with humiliation. This is what her aunt truly believes. That she's unworthy of love, of anything good. "You don't know anything about him," Indy whispers, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "Bryant's different. He cares about me. Stop." Her aunt interrupts, the command sharp and final. "I don't want to hear it. You will not see him again. Do you understand me? I won't have you ruining your life over some boy who won't give you a second thought once he's had his fun." Indy stands there, feeling as if the ground beneath her is slowly crumbling. The words keep coming, each one a heavy blow to her heart, until she feels like she can't breathe, like she's drowning in them. She wants to yell, to scream, to tell her aunt that she's wrong, that she deserves happiness, but the words get stuck in her throat. "I won't let you make the same mistakes I did," her aunt continues, her voice softening with a cold, pitying tone. "You need to understand that love isn't something for people like us. It's not a luxury we can afford. People like you, like me, don't get happy endings, Indy. We just survive. That's all." Indy's eyes fill with tears, and for a moment, everything feels like it's closing in on her. Her aunt's words don't just sting, they cut deep, carving into her sense of self-worth and leaving a scar that feels impossible to heal. But something inside Indy stirs. A quiet, stubborn voice rises from deep within her. She won't let her aunt's hatred define her. She won't let it shape her into something small, something broken. She's not her aunt. She's not destined to live a life without love. Indy takes a shaky breath, wiping her eyes quickly, trying to steady herself. "I don't believe that," she says, her voice trembling but steady. "I'm not you. I deserve love, and I deserve to be happy. I won't let you take that from me." Her aunt stares at her, disbelief flickering in her eyes for a brief moment before it's replaced with a cold sneer. "We'll see how long that lasts," she mutters under her breath, before turning and walking away. Indy stands frozen in the hallway, the words echoing in her mind, a heavy weight pressing on her chest. She doesn't know how she'll move forward, but one thing is clear: she won't let her aunt's bitterness steal her hope. She may not know what the future holds, but she knows that she won't give up on love, not now, not ever. Bryant tries to comfort her, but Indy pushes him away, believing she doesn't deserve happiness. Alone in her room, Indy questions everything she thought she knew about herself. Act 11. Bryant's letter. Bryant leaves a heartfelt letter for Indy, reminding her of her worth and strength. Indy's heart aches as she enters her room, still reeling from her aunt's harsh words. She can't shake the feeling of worthlessness that's clung to her since that painful conversation, her aunt's voice echoing in her mind. She's just about to sit down on her bed when she notices something unusual on her pillow, an envelope, neatly folded and sealed with care. Curious, she picks it up, her fingers trembling slightly as she turns it over. Her name is written in a familiar handwriting, Bryant's. Her chest tightens, and for a moment, she simply stares at the letter, unsure of what to expect. What could he possibly have to say? With a deep breath, she opens the envelope and unfolds the letter inside. The words are written in neat, flowing script, but it's the warmth of them that hits her hardest. She begins to read. "Indy, I don't know what you're facing right now, but I can feel the weight of it in my heart. I know things aren't easy for you, and I wish more than anything that I could make it all better. But what I can do is remind you of something I see every time I look at you, your strength. You've been through more than most people could handle, and you've kept going. You've faced hardships and yet, you still carry kindness with you. You still care, you still love, even when it's hard. That takes more strength than you can possibly imagine. And I need you to remember that. You are worthy of love, Indy. Not because you're perfect, but because you are enough just as you are. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone, least of all someone who doesn't see the amazing person that you are. There is so much light in you, and I see it every time you smile, every time you stand up for what's right, every time you show the world your heart. Don't let anyone make you doubt your worth. You've got so much strength in you, strength that I admire every single day. Don't let anyone take that from you. And don't let them take your dreams either. You deserve happiness, Indy, just as much as anyone else. Don't ever forget that. I'm here for you, always. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. You are not alone. With all my heart, Bryant." Indy lowers the letter slowly, her hands shaking slightly as she processes his words. The room feels warmer somehow, the weight on her chest easing as she takes in the message. Bryant's letter is a lifeline, a reminder that, despite her aunt's cruel words, there are people who see her. People who believe in her. Tears well up in her eyes, not from sadness but from something deeper, a feeling of being understood, of being seen for who she truly is. The world outside her room might still feel overwhelming, her aunt's judgment still a cloud hanging over her, but in this moment, she feels a glimmer of hope. She feels like maybe, just maybe, she's worth more than the hurt she's been carrying. Indy presses the letter to her chest, a quiet sob escaping her as she closes her eyes. Bryant's words are a promise that she is enough, that she has the power to rise above the darkness and find her way. She takes a deep breath, wiping her eyes and folding the letter carefully before placing it in her drawer. She doesn't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long while, she feels a surge of strength within her, a strength that's always been there, just waiting to be acknowledged. His words reignite something inside her, a desire to break free from her aunt's control. Indy begins to quietly rebel, making small choices for herself. Act 12. Taking a stand with Bryant's encouragement, Indy applies for a photography scholarship. Indy sits at her desk, staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. The photography scholarship application is open, but she hasn't typed a single word yet. She's been procrastinating for days, unsure if she even has what it takes to apply. Her mind keeps replaying the doubts her aunt planted in her, reminding her of the limitations she's always felt. Who is she to think she could win a scholarship? What if she's not good enough? But then she remembers Bryant's words, his encouragement, his unwavering belief in her. "You've got this, Indy," he had said that day when they talked about the future. "You have so much talent. Don't let anyone make you doubt it." Indy takes a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What if he's right? What if this could be her chance to finally break free of the confines of her small world? What if this scholarship could be the stepping stone to something bigger, something beyond the walls of her aunt's house, beyond the routine of her daily life? Her heart races at the thought of it, and she feels a spark of excitement she hasn't felt in a long time. She opens her photography folder, pulling up some of her best shots, the ones that show the world through her lens, the beauty she captures in everyday moments. She's always loved photography, but it's more than just a hobby. It's her way of expressing herself, of finding meaning in a world that often feels too harsh. With renewed determination, she begins to type. "Dear Scholarship Committee, my name is Indy Thompson, and I'm applying for the photography scholarship because I believe in the power of capturing moments, the fleeting, the quiet, and the unspoken. I've always seen the world through a lens, finding beauty in the simplest things, the way light falls on a city street, the way nature weaves stories into the fabric of life, the way people's faces tell stories without words. Photography allows me to pause time, to honor those moments, and to share them with others. Growing up, I never had much. I faced obstacles that made me question my worth, but photography has always been my escape. It's a way for me to see the world differently, to focus on the things that matter most. I want to use this scholarship to pursue my dream of becoming a professional photographer, to tell stories with my images, and to show others the beauty I see. Thank you for considering my application. Warm regards, Indy Thompson." She reads over the letter again, and this time, instead of the fear that used to grip her, she feels a sense of pride. This is her story, her truth. The doubt is still there, lurking in the back of her mind, but this time it's quieter. This time, she feels stronger than before. Taking a deep breath, Indy clicks submit, her finger hovering over the mouse for a brief moment. And then, with a rush of relief, she clicks it. It's done. Indy leans back in her chair, the weight of indecision and fear lifting off her shoulders. She may not know what comes next, but she knows she took the first step. She smiles to herself, thinking of Bryant and how his belief in her has pushed her to reach for something she never thought possible. She stands up, a quiet sense of accomplishment filling her chest. It's not about winning the scholarship, it's about showing herself that she has the courage to go after what she wants, to trust in her own abilities. And for the first time in a long time, Indy feels like she's on the path to something bigger. She walks over to her camera and picks it up, holding it in her hands like it's a part of her, because it is. This is just the beginning. She confronts her aunt and uncle, standing up for her dreams for the first time. Though terrified, Indy feels a newfound sense of power. Act 13, the separation. Bryant's family decides to move away, leaving both him and Indy heartbroken. Indy walks to the front door of Bryant's house, a sense of unease weighing heavily on her shoulders. The air feels thick, as though something heavy is about to happen. She's been hearing rumors, whispers from other people at school, but nothing could have prepared her for the news Bryant is about to share. As she knocks and enters, Bryant's mom greets her with a forced smile, her eyes betraying a hint of sadness. "Hey, Indy." Bryant's upstairs. Indy's heart skips a beat as she climbs the stairs, her mind racing. She finds Bryant sitting at his desk, his back turned, staring at a stack of packed boxes in the corner of his room. The familiar sight of his room, the one where they'd spent hours talking, laughing, and dreaming, now feels foreign. Empty. "Bryant?" Indy's voice cracks slightly, and he turns to face her, his eyes red-rimmed as if he's been crying. The sight of him so vulnerable takes Indy by surprise, and her stomach churns with worry. "Hey," Bryant says softly, forcing a small smile, but it doesn't reach his eyes. I have something to tell you." Indy steps closer, feeling a knot tighten in her chest. "What's going on?" Bryant hesitates, glancing at the packed boxes, before meeting her gaze. "My family is moving," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're leaving town at the end of the week." The words hit Indy like a punch to the gut, the shock crashing over her in waves. For a moment, she can't process what he's saying, her mind unable to fully comprehend the weight of his words. "What? No. No, you can't be serious," she stammers, her voice faltering. Bryant nods slowly, his expression filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Indy. It wasn't my choice. My parents, they got an opportunity somewhere else, and we're moving. It's happening really fast." Indy's breath catches in her throat. She feels like the ground has shifted beneath her feet, as if the foundation of everything they've built together is crumbling. "But, we've only just started to," her voice breaks, and she swallows hard, fighting back the tears that threaten to spill. "I know," Bryant says, standing up and walking over to her. "I know. It feels like everything's falling apart. I didn't want this to happen either." He reaches out, gently taking her hand in his, and for a brief moment, Indy allows herself to lean into the comfort of his touch. But the reality of the situation doesn't disappear. "Bryant, I don't know how to do this without you," Indy admits, her voice trembling. "You've become so important to me. I don't want you to leave." Bryant looks down, his jaw tight, and for a moment, Indy sees the vulnerability in him that mirrors her own. "I don't want to leave either. I've been thinking about it non-stop, about how much it hurts to even say goodbye. But I don't have a choice." Indy pulls away slightly, feeling a lump rise in her throat. The thought of losing him is unbearable. "So, what does this mean for us?" she asks, her words barely audible. "Are we just done?" Bryant's eyes soften, and he pulls her into a tight embrace. "No, Indy. We're not done. But I don't know what's going to happen. I'll always care about you. You know that, right?" Indy nods, burying her face in his chest as tears begin to fall. "I care about you too, Bryant. So much. I don't want to lose you." "I know," he whispers, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I don't want to lose you either." The room is filled with a heavy silence, both of them holding onto each other as if that's the only thing keeping them from falling apart completely. For a moment, the world outside feels distant, like none of it matters. But Indy knows deep down that things are changing. And no matter how hard she clings to the present, the future is pulling them in different directions. As the days pass, the reality of Bryant's move sets in. They spend every moment they can together, savoring the last bits of time they have. Every conversation feels more precious, every touch more lingering. But with every passing hour, the inevitability of his departure hangs over them like a dark cloud. The day before Bryant leaves, they meet at the park, a quiet place that's become their spot. It's where they shared their first real conversation, where they laughed, where they cried. It feels like a lifetime ago. "I don't know how to say goodbye," Indy admits, her voice breaking as she looks at him. Bryant shakes his head, his eyes full of pain. "You don't have to. I'm not saying goodbye forever. I'll keep in touch. And who knows? Maybe our paths will cross again." Indy smiles through her tears, the hope in his words giving her a little comfort. "Promise?" "Promise," he replies, his voice steady, though his own eyes are filled with unshed tears. As they embrace one last time, Indy clings to him, unwilling to let go. In that moment, she realizes how much Bryant has meant to her, the way he's been a source of light in her dark world, the way he's helped her believe in herself. And no matter how far apart they may be, she knows she'll carry him with her, in her heart, always. They share a tearful goodbye, promising to never forget each other. Indy is left alone, forced to navigate her journey of self-discovery without him. Act 14, Transformation. Months pass, and Indy's confidence grows. Months have passed since Bryant left, and while the ache of his absence never fully fades, Indy's life has slowly shifted. The emptiness in her chest that once felt unbearable has softened, replaced by a sense of strength she never knew she had. The photographs she took, the memories they shared, and the encouragement he gave her have become the foundation upon which she's built something new, a version of herself that's unafraid to chase her dreams. Indy spends more time at the animal shelter, where she's found a deep sense of purpose. The animals give her a sense of peace, and every time she volunteers, she feels like she's doing something good, something meaningful. It's no longer just about escaping the harshness of her home life. It's about finding joy in helping others and discovering how capable she truly is. Her photography has blossomed too. She's capturing more moments, smiles, sunsets, candid snapshots of life. And for the first time, she's been asked to showcase some of her work at a local art exhibit. When she received the invitation, she was shocked. Her photos were being recognized, validated in a way that made her believe in herself even more. She has a portfolio now, something she never imagined she'd have, and it's slowly paving the way to the future she's always dreamed of. Indy still takes pictures of the everyday things, the little moments that make life feel magical. But now, there's more confidence behind the lens. She sees the world differently, not just as a passive observer, but as someone who can shape the narrative, tell a story with each frame. At school, Indy holds her head higher. The whispers and the stares that used to make her shrink into herself no longer have the power to break her down. She's not the same girl who let others' judgments control her. She's learned to own her space, her voice, her worth. One afternoon, as she's walking through the school hallways, she notices a group of students laughing near the lockers. A few months ago, the laughter would have been enough to send her retreating, unsure of herself. But today, she stands tall, her camera slung over her shoulder, a smile playing on her lips as she walks past them with quiet confidence. She doesn't care what they think anymore. She's found something stronger than their opinions, her own belief in who she is and what she can achieve. The occasional message from Bryant still brightens her day. He's been busy with his new life, but their bond hasn't completely faded. They exchange letters, occasional phone calls, and short texts, sharing stories of their lives and encouraging each other from afar. She's learned to live without him by her side, but the thought of him, his belief in her, his support, has become a quiet strength she carries with her every day. Even with everything changing, Indy knows she's not the same girl who felt small and insignificant in Bryant's absence. She's stronger, more self-assured. She's become the person she always wanted to be, someone who embraces their own worth, who isn't afraid to dream big, and who's unafraid to walk into the unknown with confidence. One evening, as she's standing in front of her camera, preparing to capture another photo for her portfolio, a thought crosses her mind. It's not about the destination anymore, it's about the journey. The steps she's taken, the growth she's experienced, have made her realize that the future doesn't need to be something she fears. It's something she can shape, something she can create on her own terms. As the sunlight spills across the room, casting warm shadows, Indy smiles softly to herself. She feels ready for whatever comes next, whatever life has to offer. And for the first time in a long while, she feels truly free. She wins the photography scholarship, begins making friends, and slowly rebuilds her life. Though Bryant is gone, his influence remains, guiding her toward becoming the person she always wanted to be. Act 15, the return at a local photography showcase. Indy's work is on display. The night of the photography showcase arrives, and Indy can barely contain her excitement. Her palms are clammy, her heart racing, but as she steps into the gallery, a sense of pride settles in her chest. The room is alive with conversation, the hum of voices mingling with the soft ambient music playing in the background. The walls are adorned with framed photographs, each one capturing a moment of beauty, a snapshot of life. And there, among the other pieces, are her photographs, her work, her heart, on display for the world to see. Indy had never imagined this moment would come. A few months ago, she would have been too afraid to even consider putting her work out there. But now, with the courage she's found through her photography, the support from the shelter, and the strength Bryant's belief in her instilled, she feels as though she's standing in the place she was always meant to be. She takes a deep breath, her fingers brushing over the frames as she walks past them. There's one of a little girl at the shelter, her face alight with joy as she holds a kitten in her arms. Another one of the city skyline at sunset, the golden light casting long shadows across the buildings. And one of a stray dog she had once taken in, the dog looking at her with trusting eyes, as if knowing she would never let it down. Indy can't help but smile, feeling a mix of awe and disbelief. This is her work, her perspective, and she's proud of every single image. It's more than just pictures, they tell a story of the things she's learned, the people and animals she's encountered, and the strength she's found within herself. As she moves through the crowd, some of the guests stop to admire her photographs, their compliments making her feel like she's floating. "This one's beautiful," one woman remarks, pointing at the photo of the sunset. "It's got such a peaceful, calming feeling to it." "Your framing is so unique," another person adds, glancing at the picture of the little girl and the kitten. "It's like you capture the moment just before it becomes a memory." Indy blushes, her cheeks flushing with warmth at their praise. "Thank you," she says softly, surprised at how comfortable she feels talking about her work. It's like the world has shifted, and suddenly, it doesn't feel so intimidating. The compliments don't feel empty. They feel like validation for everything she's worked for, everything she's overcome. A few minutes later, Indy notices a familiar face in the crowd, her aunt. She hasn't seen her much lately, but she's always known that her aunt's presence in her life would never be far behind. Indy's nerves flare for a moment, but she forces herself to take a steadying breath. She's no longer the scared girl she once was. She's grown. Her aunt approaches her, standing a little too stiffly, her eyes scanning the photos on the wall before resting on Indy. "I see you've made a name for yourself," she says with a neutral tone, though there's a hint of surprise in her voice. "These photos are impressive." Indy stands tall, a small but confident smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you. I've been working hard." Her aunt doesn't say anything for a moment, her gaze still fixed on the photographs. "You've certainly done something different with your life. I'll give you that." Indy nods, feeling a rush of satisfaction. Her aunt's approval may not come easily, but she doesn't need it anymore. She's learned to trust her own instincts. Just as the silence between them begins to feel awkward, someone else approaches Indy, a young woman with bright eyes and an eager smile. "Are you Indy, the photographer whose work is on display?" she asks, her voice full of energy. Indy nods, surprised by the attention. "Yes, that's me. Thank you for coming. I love your work," the woman continues, her eyes lighting up as she looks at the photos. "There's so much life in them. You really capture the spirit of the moment. I can tell you've got a unique perspective. Have you thought about doing this professionally?" Indy feels a spark of hope flicker inside her. "Actually, I've been applying for scholarships and looking into programs to further my photography. I'm thinking about making it my career." The woman grins. "You should. You've got real talent. If you ever want to collaborate or need advice, I'd be happy to help. I work with a few photographers around town." Indy's heart skips a beat, and a warmth spreads through her chest. This is what it's all about, finding connections, seeing possibilities, and taking her passion to new heights. For the first time, Indy feels like she truly belongs in this world of photography. And the more people she meets, the more confident she becomes in her own abilities. As the night winds down, Indy stands alone for a moment, taking it all in. She feels the weight of Bryant's encouragement, the long hours she's spent honing her craft, and the courage it took to put herself out there. And in this quiet moment, surrounded by the echoes of compliments and applause, Indy knows that this is just the beginning. Bryant shows up unexpectedly, having returned to town. Their reunion is gentle, filled with unspoken understanding and the same stubborn care that first brought them together. Closing scene, a new beginning. Indy and Bryant sit beneath the stars, the cat curled up between them. Bryant reaches for her hand, and this time, Indy doesn't pull away. With the weight of the past behind them, They look toward a future built on love, self-worth, and the quiet magic of finding someone who believes in you, even when you can't believe in yourself.
The Stories book is a captivating collection of tales that traverse diverse genres and emotions, spanning the realms of fantasy, science fiction, romance, and mystery. Each narrative is a journey into the unexpected, weaving intricate plots and compelling characters. With a skillful blend of vivid imagery and thought-provoking themes, this anthology invites readers to explore the depths of imagination and discover the universal threads that connect us all. From heartwarming moments to spine, we hope you enjoyed these captivating video stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content like this. Thanks for watching, and keep spreading the video story.